Steady. Steady. You are soldiers of dinos. No matter what comes through the gate, you will stand your ground. And stand their ground they did, as Team Dinosaurs, led by kicker Kaimi Fairbairn, held the best team in the league to a measly 53 points this week, which they needed as they only scored 63 points themselves. They held the line with a masterclass in Fantasy D on the route to the dub. Welcome in once again to the dungeon of the Doctors of Doom, where I am your host with the most, Alex the Shark Sparks, and alongside me is my partner in crime, allegedly, Mitch BRB playing Rust Black, and our producer, the man who is now on the outside looking in for the playoffs, Vinny. At least I set up the Zoom call, Santucci. Say hello to all the Dungeoneers out there, fellas.
Hello.
Hey, I mean, without me, we'd have like some public Zoom call with a time limit. So, setting it up, key thing. And I must note, I don't know if it's the production skills or what. Mitch has been like 5 minutes early at least 7 weeks in a row. So this is like some sort of record for those that are at home keeping track.
Well, there could be a real answer for this, and then I'll give an on-air answer. The on-air answer is I'm trying to be respectful to your guys' time.
All right. So in the intro, you noticed that I've called people Doomsdayers. I've called them Dungeoneers. I'm also considering Delvers, Explorers. What would be a good name for the listeners out there? That listen to the dungeon of the Doctors of Doom. What name should we give them? Usually, the fan bases often have names. What would we give them?
The Avengerettes.
The Avengerettes. I don't know if that was going to catch on. We could make it a poll.
Mitch can even make the pod fans about his fantasy team somehow.
Who doesn't love the Avengers?
I like the Doomsdayers and the Dungeoneers. I think those two are pretty good.
That's a great question, Alex. I think I would like a week to think about that. I don't want to come up with that right now. That's a really good question.
All right, that can be a poll question. So get your thoughts in on what you might think it would be. Anyone have anything that they want to talk about before I go into the league recap for the week?
No, I actually thought your intro was one of my like top talking points for the week. So, but most things come from a very bitter place. So I say we jump into the week.
All right, so we're gonna start with around the league as we always do with the different games. We'll start.
Can you share the screen, please?
Oh, yeah, great call. Probably should have remembered to do that before we start the show. I think one time I've gotten it right, and every other time I've forgotten.
No, I sit here and I'm like, I'm not gonna interrupt him. He's gonna do it. I'm not gonna, he's definitely gonna do it.
He'll get there when he gets there, fellas. All right. Anyway, so yeah, here we are. First game. Sharks, Yak of Lamb. Sharks take another L. Sharks have been pretty beat up, honestly, in the injury department.
Goldfish.
First, we start with the trend of trades gone wrong. Trade for my boy Thuggins. Second time I traded for him this season. No TDs. There was a pick. All rushing touchdowns in their game. I also continue my trend of making savvy waiver moves. Picked up Bo Nix off waivers because I thought he had a good matchup. Bo Nix outscores my quarterback by 10 points. And almost I should have beat the Chiefs. Like the kicker hadn't, hosed them by getting the extra point blocked. Just injury concerns. I was driving and I hear that, Jones gets hurt. They report on the radio that he's broken a rib. He's out for season. Then I get home and he's expected to play this week. So I don't even know what's going on with Jones. On top of that, you've got Dak is now going to be out for season. And you can see CeeDee Lamb's production without Dak. Look, the Cowboys had 45 yards passing from Cooper Rush, 21 yards passing from Trey Lance, and a pick. That was their offensive production without Dak. So say what you will about Dak Prescott not being elite. I sure as hell don't think he's the problem in Dallas. What do you guys think about this matchup, boys?
Yeah, I just a little callback. I think when we were doing these and you were undefeated, I said you're going to have as many losses as you have lower leg injuries. And so far, Dak is 1, Jones is 2. Is there a third one that we can find on your roster somewhere? Or no, like everybody else has been pretty healthy, but you've already passed that at 3. The Cowboys are atrocious. I feel terrible for your team as far as losing Dak.
The third one was my kicker. So if you look
and Mike Evans. Mike
Evans hasn't played in weeks, and I had to pick up a backup kicker this week. I mean, who did fine, right? I just picked up the replacement, but I wasn't able to use my kicker this week either. So Lots of, again, none of this would have mattered. Even if I made the perfect starts, if I started Tracy and Bo Nix, like if I had made which, by the way, I'm not blaming myself for leaving Tracy on the bench because, yes, he had a great game, but Jones would have beat that if he didn't leave the game hurt. Jones was crushing it. So I think I made the right call. But even if I started both the correct players, I still would have lost this week. So my team just did not show up.
Yeah. I think, kind of since we're talking about your team and your matchup more specifically, I think this week was one of the wildest in fantasy because all of the relevant points were scored Thursday night. And if you either had or playing Burrow, CeeDee Lamb, or Lamar Jackson, like those games were already decided. So, and if you look at the rest of the scoring across the league, if you didn't have one of those players, you didn't really do that well. So
yeah,
I think that was kind of the storyline for this week.
Only one team broke the century mark this week with break, and so let's move through here. So yeah, look at the top scores this week. 104, Lamar Jackson's on this team. 92, Chase is on this team. 96, Burrow's on this team. So yeah, we'll move right along to the.
Wait, hold on.
Sorry, go ahead.
But going back to my favorite or non-favorite in fantasy football is whenever your player is involved in a non-football related story. So, like Adrian Peterson beating his child is an example of a non-football related story.
Way to really elevate the podcast by bringing up child abuse. Thanks, Mitch. That really helps.
Lamb is in one of my favorite non-football stories that I've heard in a long time. I'm sure everyone has an opinion on this, but like the funniest thing in the world to me is seeing $1 billion owner and Jerry Jones and CeeDee Lamb go back and forth about the sun, and that's my favorite story of the year. It's not even close. It's like. Also, if Joe Burrow gets a normal game, I know he had 40 points last week, but if he just has his average and Lamb catches that touchdown, you easily win. So it's that close of margins. But at the same time, like Lamb asked as a, by the way, if you look at the top 20 players in the NFL that are paid, 17 are quarterbacks, 18 and 19 are the first non-two quarterbacks, and that's Justin Jefferson and CeeDee Lamb at $36 million a year. So a $36 million wide receiver a year is complaining about the sun, and a even more rich billionaire owner is like asked about the sun, and his response was, "Oh, why don't we just tear down the whole stadium?" I'm like, wait, time out. We just asked if you should put up the curtains, and he's like, "Oh, well, we know where the sun is. Why don't we just tear down the whole stadium?" I'm like, that is the biggest baby comment I've ever heard. It's like, I can't wait to channel my Jerry Jones the rest of the year. It's like, well, Josh Allen had to. Oh, why don't I just not start Josh Allen the rest of the year? It's like, I don't understand how you argue with a billionaire baby, but that's my favorite story of the year. It's not even close.
Yeah, and I think even Jerry Jones in there says like, well, both teams have to go against the sun. I'm like, yeah, but the sun's only coming through that angle most likely for one specific quarter. So no, it only affects one team on the field. That's not affecting both teams. It's a pretty crazy thing that in this, and my whole thing is like, well, what do you want me to do? Tear down $1 billion stadium? I was like, no, but don't you think you would have thought about that while building the $1 billion stadium? That to me is just like, just admit you may have messed up and that you need to fix something.
Yeah, it's also worse. I saw a tweet or a TikTok video or whatever, and it was like they had Veterans Day. They were giving honor to Tom Landry, who is a World War II vet and their head coach, Hall of Famer, and they misspelt his last name on the overhead screen. And Post Malone played at halftime, and they had the curtains up, and they took it down for the second half. There's so much, there's so much crazy stuff to this story that's just like, and now everyone stand and give a round of applause to Tom Laundry, and everyone's just like, what? And they look at the overhead thing, and it's Laundry, and it was just like, what is going on?
For anyone who doesn't know, Tom Landry's a Hall of Famer. And that's probably who they're referencing with Tom Laundry.
Right. That's what's, and then they're trying to do Veterans Day or whatever. So it's just like, what is going on in cowboy land right now? All right. Sorry, go on, Alex.
Yeah, all good. So moving right along here to the Butthead Gummy Bears matchup. So we talked about Jamar Chase. Luis gets 44 points from Jamar Chase and barely hangs on to win. It's a single-digit win after getting 44 from Chase. Chris put up quite the fight. I mean, honestly, Luis... But hey, at the end of the day, he got the dub, and he's closing the gap. He's only 2 games back of me with 4 games left to play, and we play each other, and he's the one who's only 1 game back in division play. So there's a world where Luis just has to beat me, but then if he can win out, and then I lose any other game besides to him, he could win the division, which is crazy considering 2 weeks ago I was up by 4 games. So I've lost 2 in a row, and he's picked up some steam. So Yeah, still surprising that he barely pulled this off with Chase's amazing play, but still. Any comments about this particular contest, boys?
I'm not looking forward to playing Chris in the future. I mean, this contest is unfortunate for Chris. It basically knocks him out for the rest of the season. But Chris's team going forward for the next 4 weeks has got Achan, who's clearly taken over as the one back. McCaffrey looks like he's coming back full speed. I thought it was going to be a little bit later than week 10 or 11. So, I mean, and then Neighbors in London might be the best wide receiver combo for any team this year or in fantasy amongst our teams. So, no, I'm glad Luis got his 44 points from Chase and effectively knocked Chris because I mean, I don't know, I'm just not looking forward to play Chris's team.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't too happy with it, but you know, it is what it is. But yeah, it came down to the Monday night game because it was Stafford versus Achan, and unfortunately, Achan did nothing. All right, moving on to the next game, we got Vinny. We'll let you do most of the yapping here, but I do want to point out a couple of things. You did squeak by and get the win here, escaping with victory despite starting Ray Davis at running back. Ray Davis, and I have to ask. I mean, obviously you had to start him because Jacobs was on a bye, and you know, Roshan. You know, if you started Johnson, you also would have 0. But you're still holding on to Brooks. Going into the season, people think, hey, Brooks might be a league winner. As it stands, we're 10 weeks in. The man hasn't played yet, and the guy who took his spot has played so good that he got a contract extension. Do you really think it's worth to keep? How long are you gonna keep holding on to this guy? This isn't a keeper league or a dynasty league. Like it's a redraft league.
Yeah, and I think they're actually going into their bye this week too. So I will be holding him another week. Here's the thing: is like he's the Chuba Hubbard extension really messes with anything that I had in mind about Brooks. I just think that he's one of those. If I'm holding on to Ray Davis for the whole season, I might as well hold on to Brooks. To be completely honest, this is probably my worst coaching week in DoD history from the fact that, like, I think I shared it offline in a text message, but on Tuesday night, I was up watching the election. I was getting ready for bed, and I was like, oh, I didn't put my waivers in, and I go to process them. I wanted to pick up Eckler or Jalen Warren, and I go to the add players, and they're not there. And I'm like, this is wild. They were there earlier in the week, only to find out that waivers had already ran. And then starting Brian Thomas over Marvin Harrison, that's also on me. I actually forgot that Trevor Lawrence was probably not going to play.
Yeah, I was going to ask you. I was going to ask you about that one because, like, starting Thomas over Harrison is fine. Starting him over Harrison when Lawrence isn't playing, I found shocking. So I'm glad you addressed that.
Yeah, it was just one of those things where I was like, all year I've been like, kind of playing roulette with the two, and I'm like, oh, I'm going to stick with the guy who's been doing better all year. And then when I literally turned on Red Zone and saw Mac Jones and was like, oh my God, you know, it was just one of those weeks. I just got caught up in everything else in life, and yeah, I mean, I cost myself points. So if I lost this week, I would have deserved to not make the playoffs. To be completely honest, it was just bad coaching.
Well, it's funny. You're actually you're actually no longer. You're currently, like you said, currently outside the playoffs. I mean, just barely, and there's still a lot of stuff left. But it is interesting. Like you'd be honestly in really bad shape had you lost this match. So it's kind of crazy that you're one of the only teams with a positive record, you know, coming into the week, and you missed both those things. Like, don't get me wrong, I've made dumb mistakes too. Like, and I lost this week, so you're still better off than me. But yeah, the fact that you've got the day wrong for waivers, you started a wide receiver whose quarterback wasn't playing, you had to start a running back who got nothing and still got the dub, is, you know, it's impressive. I'll give you that. So
Vinny, have you're 3-0 in the last 3 weeks?
No, I lost to Luis last week.
Okay, so this is the epitome of a Avengers team. So you go out and you get the 30+ point QB, and then your rest of your team is so bad, but it doesn't matter. It's just overshadowed. Look at last 3 weeks. Hurts has gotten 30, 33, and 30, and Vinny's 2-1, and probably shouldn't have won maybe 2 of the games. But in this league, if you can get that 425 point quarterback, it does not matter. This is the Avengers team if I've ever seen it. You have the top QB, you have one top 12 running back, and you have one top 12 wide receiver, and you win your division every year because you're a good enough manager to where you can find a tight end or Vinny actually drafted a really one, so that's a bad example. But you can get a good kicker, you can get a good defense, you can get a good number 2 wide receiver.
It's also a bad example because Vinny is currently not winning his division and not going to make the playoffs if they ended today. But I get what you're saying. But also, I want to go back to what you said about. I want to go back to what you said about Luis. I don't think anyone doesn't deserve a win. If you get a win, you get the win because, like, it's not just about, like, yes, there's some luck involved in fantasy football for sure, but, like, all you can do is make the best decisions for your own team. And if your opponent doesn't make the best decisions, you won because you did and they didn't, right? So like if you ever win a game because you started the right players and they started the wrong ones, that's not just the negative on them. It's positive on you because you made the right choice. And had you not made the right choice and they did, you would have lost. So you still did the right thing, even though like, yeah, sure, technically had they made all the right choices, they would have beat you. I think you should still, like, if you win, you deserve to win, regardless of how it goes down.
But
kind of like
this is what I'm saying though. Go back to the draft. Yeah, but go back to the draft round one. It's like you win a lot of these games when you lock up that QB in the first round or on the turn, or even more specifically, like Nolan goes higher in the first round. He's just picked the wrong QBs. The thing is, like, you don't. I think I've said on this podcast, I don't need to outscore. I just need to score 85, 92 points a week, and I need to challenge the other team to score more than me every week. And then you look at it over a whole season. That's always been my strategy. So I said to Vinny, we were talking about over-unders, and I said any team with the top fantasy QB, because Vinny asked me at the beginning of the season who I thought my number one fantasy QB was, and I said it was Ertz, then Allen. So if you have theoretically the number one fantasy QB, that's going to lock you in. Look at what it's doing for Adam's team. Adam doesn't even really play waivers. He doesn't even really manage his team. He's got Dobbins on his bench for half the year, and he's the number one team in the league because of Lamar Jackson. It's just, if you get that guy, it makes so much for being a bad fantasy coach. That's me. You just get that one fantasy QB, and then all the rest of my moves get overshadowed of being bad because I'm still winning, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it does. Makes complete sense. Adam has played games without Jonathan Taylor, without Nico Collins for half the year, and I would argue that he's still like the most intimidating team in our at least my division, possibly in the league. Just the way Lamar's playing.
He's got the most points for in the league. Most points scored, and that's with Nico Collins not playing for a few weeks, and he's leading his division. So yeah, there's a lot going right there. All right, let's move right along. Speaking of deserving the win, sometimes you get win with a masterclass in Fantasy D, as I pointed out. So let's take a look at this matchup here. Team Dinosaurs, as I referenced in the intro, playing excellent Fantasy D. So did the Spark Plugs, but just unfortunately neither team scoring offense. The reason that I referenced Kaimi Fairbairn in the intro, he was the high scorer in this match on both teams with his 13, outscored every running back, wide receiver, and quarterback in the matchup. So yeah, definitely.
I'm just happy Nolan finally called the wrong week for Komet. He always calls the tight end Komet correctly, like when to bench him and when to start him. And this is the first week Nolan's called Komet incorrectly. It just makes me happy. I'm sorry, Nolan. Because he always plays the tight end. He didn't know
because he dropped his other tight end. So that's actually the only tight end he has. So
right, but I'm saying he had to make that decision during the week. Is what I'm saying. It's finally, he's been like 11-0 on that decision, or 10-0 on that decision. Now he's 10-1.
Yeah, and Baker Mayfield finally came back down to earth. I don't blame Baker. They were in San Francisco, one of the best defenses in football, not fantasy defenses necessarily, but actual defenses, and again missing
just
all his weapons.
For Miles, what upsets me is like I tell Miles never listens to me, and it's getting to a point where it's like what I say, he probably does the opposite. So I need to be careful. But I was like, you cannot. Pittsburgh's defense is all world, and then you dropped the Jets defense 4 weeks ago because you were so mad at them. Miles drafted the Jets. He dropped them because they were so bad, and now you're afraid to start Murray against the Jets, who have had bad weeks. And Reddick's not even. Sorry, not Reddick. The other guy like holding out on the line. So it's like. I tell him, I'm like, you have to, how do you pick? Basically, my question is, how is Miles going to decide for the rest of the year between Murray and Daniels? How are you going to decide? I think Vinny even said it last week. Like, do I upgrade from Murray's up and down weeks, or do I just ride out Murray? How are we going to figure this out?
Yeah, I mean,
don't get me wrong. I think we've talked about this with no, sorry, Alex. No, I think we just kind of on that exact point. We've talked about this with Miles's team. Like, his team is scary. But when you continue to play roulette with your quarterbacks, and you have two quarterbacks like Daniels and Murray, they may both have bad weeks, they may both have good weeks, but if you guess wrong, you don't even maximize on the volatility of these guys. Like, you just get the low weeks 3 or 4 weeks in a row, kind of screwing yourself. And I think, Mitch, you said it earlier in the year, you should trade one. And I think it's been brought up multiple times, like guessing who to start week in and week out with these two quarterbacks is going to be super tough. I'd rather just ride the high weeks of either Murray or Daniels and just start one the whole season.
I don't know what to tell him.
Yeah,
it's matchups based, but it's really hard to predict.
I am with you, Mitch. I do think it was a wild decision to start Daniels over Murray. Like, yes, in a vacuum, if I'm building a team, I'd much rather have Daniels than Murray, right? If I'm building a fantasy roster, I'd rather have Daniels than Murray long term. But the steel curtain is real. I would definitely have made a different decision here, but he got the win either way. Like I said, you still deserve to win. And speaking of making wrong decisions, I commented this on the pod last week, and as far as I know, Dad listens because he has me sending the links. But again, he started Algier over Rashad White, and I get that Rashad White has kind of lost his starting job. Like, he's now losing touches to Irving. It's more of a committee, but he still gets more than Algier. I'm shocked that he's going with Algier over White. I mean, obviously, if Robinson plays, this matchup might be different, but it's still kind of wild to me that he keeps doing that. But yeah, Miles definitely has difficult decisions with his quarterback, roulette room. But I do understand the appeal of the McLaurin Daniels stack, right? That's fun. But yeah, big D going on here. Moving right along. This game's not important. We'll just keep going. No, I'm kidding. I actually have nothing to say about Mitch's team, and he gets 29 points from his defense because Dallas was such hot garbage that I talked about in the beginning. But I want to talk about Sylvie's team. I got to point out once again, Lauren's still rostered, not even active this week. She's still like, you know what? I'm not cutting him. I think he's just riding out the whole season on that bench. I can't believe she's still holding on to him. Obviously, Caleb Williams, I said he was a trash can fire, and he absolutely is. And I think it's funny, the Bears coach was interviewed this week, and he made the point to say, we're going to be making changes to fix things. However, no matter what, Caleb Williams is still the starter. We're past the trade deadline. What other change can you possibly make at this point in the season besides a quarterback change? And I'm not saying you should. You draft a rookie, you have to give him more than 10 games. Do I think he'll get better? Sure. Do I think he'll be good? No, I've said that coming into the draft. But it's how can you say you're going to make changes? What are you going to change? You can't trade for anyone anymore. It's not like there's some world-beating, receivers, offensive linemen, running backs sitting at home. And speaking of running backs, Swift has been playing decently enough. They felt comfortable enough trading a running back. So what do the Bears think they're going to make a change at that's going to make Williams do any better?
Yeah, I don't necessarily. I think that's just coach talk and coach speak, and maybe it's changing a couple people out on defense. Maybe it's lighting a fire
they fired
in
the
some of
OC
the
today,
offensive
right?
linemen.
They fired.
Oh,
the
did they
OC
end up?
today.
Did they
Yes.
end up firing him? Is it
Yeah,
Shane Waldron? Is that who their
Waldron
OC
or
is?
whatever, yeah, and Eberflus is the head coach. So this goes back to what Cam Newton said at the beginning of the year or whatever, before any game happened, before Daniels was doing well and before Caleb was doing well. He goes, when you have a quarterback, when you have a coach who's not symbiotic or where, at the parallel with the QB to where you get hired at the same time, if you have a coach that's on his way out and then you draft the top QB, the coach is going to try and play for his job, but that's not the best for the development of the QB. You need a head coach that has stability in his job for at least a year to call the correct plays for the quarterback rather than trying to win his job. And that's exactly what's happening to Matt Eberflus. He's had the plays called because he wants to win, so they fired the OC, and Eberflus is going to be out the door in the next couple of weeks. So I think that could be the biggest change to Caleb Williams if it's true that he just doesn't have a coordinator or a head coach that's working in or in parallel with him. So, but or I'll wait till we go through the breakthrough. But my question of the week kind of spurs off of Caleb. And then, the last thing I was gonna say, I remember now, is this was actually a lot of fun for me because I'm delusional and I'm trying to catch Nolan at what's it called, in the division. So I'm rooting against all of Nolan's players, correct? But I'm also rooting against the people I'm playing this week. So Nolan has Algier and Sylvie has Bijan. So that 1 yard run was 3 rushing attempts for Algier. And I was like, no, stop him. And then they brought in on 4th and goal. I was like, they're going to kick a field goal. This is perfect for me. And it was 4th and goal. And Bijan comes around, like, oh, this is why I can't do fantasy anymore. Because it's you're just what am I going? What's going on here? And the last thing I'll say about this game is thank you, Eagles D. I drafted the Steelers. I've started the Steelers every single week. The Steelers are the number 3 ranked defense. So I know it seems in hindsight a lot more obvious to you guys, start the Eagles against the Cowboys. But I woke up every day going, am I going to bench the 3rd best defense in the league, the team that I drafted for an Eagles D this week? And if I didn't, I lose by 2 points.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
I also love the fact that Mitchell won because of his defense, because the amount of times he's complained about other people's combined kicker defense score this year.
Oh yeah, no, it's great. I have a continuous score being calculated. I was gonna say for 1 week in the podcast where I have everyone's defense and kicker score total, and then that's a percentage of their total points. And I have that. It's not as drastic as I thought, so I haven't brought it on the podcast. But
Yeah,
it's
I
not
think
hasn't really worked in my favor.
while we
Go
have
on.
Bijan here, I just a couple things I noted this week. One, that 37-yard touchdown by Bijan was absolutely disgusting from like a straight line breaking tackle speed. And then that also reminded me Jamar Chase's touchdown where he caught the ball in the middle of the field and still had like 4 or 5 defenders between him and the end zone and just outran them all. Did you just some of these dudes are just on a whole new level. But Bijan's touchdown run, if you haven't seen it, it's like there's no way that he should have scored. Somehow he does. He literally drugged Tyrann Mathieu like 8 yards into the end zone and then didn't even phase him. Like he just kept running. And Jamar Chase is outrunning those. These guys are just on a completely different level of football. It's kind of cool to see Bijan finally being what everybody thought he could be.
You could give this could I don't want it to be about my team, but you could give a one word answer just because like Alex's point earlier, there's no one off waivers you're gonna grab now. There's no world beater, there's no game changer, there's no nothing. So it's like I'm kind of stuck between Waddle or DJ Moore because Metcalf comes back next for me next week. So I'm kind of stuck between Waddle and DJ Moore the rest of the year. You can just do a one word answer or you can go on an explanation if you want. But like if it was your team, would you have more confidence? I know this is a terrible, I mean, you could say net neither, but DJ Moore or Waddle for the rest of the year. Thoughts?
Honestly, man, that's tough because I feel like I would say Waddle just because DJ Moore has had one good game the entire season. One game.
Yeah.
If you take out this one game, every other game is single digit fantasy points.
It's terrible.
Whereas Waddle, if you watch the game, Waddle got 57 yards on 2 catches on the first drive and they just didn't throw them the ball again. So like
Right.
Waddle was getting open, like their offense wasn't clicking. So like yes, he also only has one game above single digit points, but he also didn't have his quarterback for most of the season. So I just feel like I feel like I'm even though like I said
I'm in
going
a lot
into the
of
season,
trouble at wide
I said
receiver
going into the
too.
season I'm not big on Tua this year, but if I have to choose between Tua and Caleb Williams, it's not a contest who I'm taking, right? Like
Yeah.
I'm very
It's
very
so
low on Caleb Williams.
it's so funny. Mitch and I's team are like built exactly the same. Like I just loathe my wide receiver 2 position. I can't quite hit it. And then you got lucky with Chase Brown, obviously, and Zach Moss going down.
Right.
I got lucky that Sylvie traded me Josh Jacobs. So
No,
it's
it's
just
the
funny.
same.
Like the team build
Yeah.
is exactly the same. I would also vote Waddle. I just have a lot more faith in the Dolphins offense. I mean, we got to give Tua some credit here. Like he barely played at the beginning of the season. He took all that time off on IR. And last week he wasn't very good. This week he wasn't very good, but at least he's starting to get the ball back in the playmakers' hands. But yeah, I agree with what Alex said. Like Waddle, I think had 55 yards on that first drive and then finished with 57. So,
Schottenheimer
um,
said there's an old what's the word axiom or saying or whatever, and it was from Schottenheimer. I heard of this many like in high school, and it was like um, the result there's a lot of NFL coaching there's so like DJ Moore is the result of this quote or whatever. It's like there's an inability to self scout your own players after you've drafted them. So like the NFL is really good at analyzing and projecting other teams players perfectly, but after you draft your own player there's an inability to self scout. That's how I am with DJ Moore right now. I don't think I have the ability to correctly diagnose him because I drafted him, if that makes sense.
yeah, it does. Makes complete sense.
I mean, also worth pointing out that Waddle led his team in targets. So that's not nothing, right? Like he had more targets than Tyreek Hill. He had more targets than Jonnu Smith. He had more targets than the running backs, Achane and Mostert. So he led the team in targets this week. So if we assume the Dolphins, like Vinny said, if we assume Tua is going to improve, then we have to assume that as he improves, Waddle's numbers get better. I don't see that happening for DJ Moore. He's had the same quarterback all year, and I mean, not even just like if you like after week 5, 2-2-3-2, right? Waddle had better games without Tua. 4-3-2-4. Like he had better games without Tua than this guy had. 4 again. Than this guy has with Caleb Williams. Also, props to Mitch. I know he was excited this week just because Laporta did something. I think that was why he was more happy than anything. One last question for you, Mitch, and then we move on.
Yeah.
If Dak had been playing, would you have started Steelers D?
No. Oh yeah, 100. Sorry. If Dak is playing, yes, 100%. I'm starting Steelers D. The only reason I picked up Eagles D was because of the Dak injury. The one last thing I do want to say is I know Alex, you did say there's no such thing as stealing a win or deserved win or the quote you said was perfectly. But in my own personal opinion, anytime I get 25 points from Barkley and Allen combined, I'm done with fantasy that week. I lost. So I agree with you. You don't necessarily deserve a win or not, but for me personally, 25 points from Saquon Barkley and Josh Allen, it's like, okay, what's else on TV? And I still won. So you know what I mean? It does feel a little dirty.
All right.
But yes, to go back to your question, 100%. Steelers are getting started without Dak's injury. So, yeah, Dak's injury might have saved me a W and maybe the playoffs. That's a good point. It's a great point.
I would just like to point out to Mitch that Saquon Barkley has 6 rushing touchdowns, and how many do you think Jalen Hurts has?
Okay, so I was going to bring that up as one of my points once we got through the thing or whatever. It's like Vinny talked about it heavily. I argued with Vinny, and I know I argued heavy with Chris and Austin at my house because we all drafted together.
I'm going to cut you off. We're going to come back to that point as soon as we finish our round.
Okay,
There's
sorry.
one game left, so we're going to finish this game first. So yeah, the curse is broken. Lamar Jackson just ran rampant all over the curse. Last week we had to stretch a little bit and say that Jalen Hurts got cursed because his wide receivers got hurt, which, by the way, Devonta Smith got hurt this week. So we'll see what happens to that. But Lamar Jackson just slapped that curse right out of here, dropping 40 fantasy points, still the number one fantasy player. None of his players got hurt that I'm aware of. They won the tight ball game because Cincinnati had some missed field goals and whatnot. So yeah, curse is broken. Brake's team, looks really good, and he hasn't even gotten. Sutton looks like a real player now all of a sudden, and he's presumably getting Collins back. Collins is off IR now. He didn't play this week, but I think Brake is the team to worry about. He's now leading his division. He's scoring the most points. He has the most points in the league. His team is finally getting healthy. Guys like Taylor and Collins and things are coming back from injury, which is what we talked about a few weeks ago. I'm worried about this team.
Yeah, I mean the team's super good. I just love how you keep. It's like the 4th time you've mentioned that he's leading the division. I'm not leading the division.
Yeah, I want to make sure
I'm
I
like
keep that
15
point
points. But I'm like 15 points behind with terrible coaching decisions this week. So it's not like it's like
you have to understand,
he's running away with it.
You have to understand.
But
in 20 years, when was the last time we could say Brake was leading the division after week 1? We've finished 10 weeks.
Trust me, I get it.
After 10 weeks, Adam Sparks and the Flying Penguins are leading their division after 10 weeks in the Doctors of Doom Fantasy Football League. This is historic. This is literally historic.
It's historic. I agree.
Well,
I agree.
It's also funny that he doesn't play waivers. He plays waivers twice the whole year, and his waiver pickup is Sutton, and Sutton's been the best wide receiver in the last 3 weeks or whatever, 4 weeks. But it's just obviously not because Chase, but he's had 13, 18, and 10. That's pretty good for a waiver wire. The other thing too is Vinny and I talked about it earlier. It's like Dobbins versus Connor. I mean, it hasn't costed Adam yet, and it seems to be a good problem. So yeah, this team is very scary just because of Lamar. But again, I don't know how he gets 90 points without Lamar's good week. Taylor is not going to get a 25-point fantasy week. Dobbins is not either. I think Connor actually has a better chance at it. Hopkins is not either because they have the way the Chiefs use their offense. He just has steady players, and then he'll get anywhere from 80 to 100 depending on what Lamar does that week, which is a very good a recipe for this. So yes, he's very scary, but this is going to come down to oh man, Cameron's team is really good, Vinny's team is really good, and Miles's team is really good. There is a world where Adam gets left out of the playoffs easily, and that's kind of what I'm hoping for right now.
Oh, I mean, there's a world where a lot of people can get left out of the playoffs. Let's see if I can move this Zoom thing. Okay.
No, I actually think right now, Adam, I would give Adam the favorite for our division, but it kind of, while we're going to the standings, I think there's a couple good points. I don't know if Mitch knows who he plays this week.
Adam, and then I have Nolan.
Yeah, so real quick, just I'll let you go, Vinny, but let me just go over standings real quick. I'm still leading my division, but as I talked about earlier, Luis is the only one left who's in contention. If Matt wins out and I lose out, and Luis, It's mathematically possible, but it'd be very hard. Luis, however, he's only 2 games back. He and I are right around the same points. He's got 6 more points than me. He plays me and is 2-1. So this division's more of a toss-up than it should be. This division, absolutely still a toss-up. Every single player is still alive here, all within 1 game of each other, and Vinny only 14 points back a break. This division, Mitch is now only 1 game behind Dad, still has a game to play against him and has more points than him. So this division is now up in the air, and so is the wild card between, again, the entire Integrity division as well as the Avengers and Spark Plugs and potentially me and Revis and Butthead. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, it was one of those things where I'm like, dang, you fall behind someone in the standings and you obviously look ahead. I think Mitchell has the inside track to his to the wild card. I mean, he can still lose to Nolan, and one of us in my division would have to run the table, which would lead us to being the division champ. And so we're somebody who in our division that's going to be fighting for wild card automatically takes another L. If you don't, then our wild card representative is going to be at 5 wins. I mean 5 losses minimum, right? So I think everybody in our division is just fighting for division title, to be completely honest. It does help me a lot that Adam and Mitch play each other this week, just because it's just automatically guarantees that another one gets a loss, unless for some reason you guys somehow manage a tie. So, it's crazy. It's the schedules are insane.
If
My
Adam
whole
beats
division
me this
is
week,
like
your
within
division's
1 game.
yeah.
It's wild.
If Adam beats me this week, your division's a lot less interesting. If I beat Adam this week, that's going to be a huge week for me. This is basically a playoff game for me more than anything else. It's because of who I'm playing, but because of the wild card situation. Going back before we ended on the teams, wherever and going the standings, going back to Matt's team. I know he's pretty much out, but Chuba Hubbard's looking like the steal of the draft in the 10th, late 9th, early 10th. I was watching, I forget which show I was watching, and they were like, oh, Chuba Hubbard might be NFC Pro Bowl running back this year. It's like the number 1 is going to be Barkley and then Kamara, right? And then after that, it's going to be between Kyron Williams, Jahmyr Gibbs, and James Conner, and Chuba Hubbard. 2 of those 4 are going to become Pro Bowl running backs or whatever. And it's like one is not like the other. Like there's an imposter in this group. Barkley, Kamara, Kyron Williams, Jahmyr Gibbs, Chuba Hubbard. Like one is an imposter here. So like that just shows like how good Chuba and how much running backs have come back this year. That one of the worst teams in the league has a top running back. So there you go.
Is
Thanks for showing it,
RB7
Alex.
right now.
Thank you for showing it.
This is on average points per game, not total points. That way it doesn't take into effect buys.
Yeah, so he might be an NFC Pro Bowl running back. Crazy.
Yeah, and I think that right there, Alex, is why I refuse to drop Jonathan Brooks, because I'm just like, I just assumed he would assume that role, and now it's like, is it worth dropping Brooks for whatever's on the waiver wire and guaranteeing that you lose that potential production? I don't know if it helps, hurts. I'm not really sure, but yeah. I did want to point out while we're looking at standings. I think and this was not necessarily like a planned topic by any means, but I do think it's wildly interesting. When you start looking at other people's teams and what the potential playoff race is. Mitch still has Josh Allen and Chase Brown on a bye, not this upcoming week, but the following.
Don't tell anyone. Shh, that's a secret.
So week 12, Josh Allen and Chase Brown are both on a bye the same week. And then both his backup running backs, I don't think they're ever going to do anything. Eckler, Justice Hill, week 14. So, but week 12 is definitely going to be
starter. There's value there, right? Robinson's missed 2 games in a row. Brian not beat.
I was going to ask you. I thought you probably wanted to pick up Eckler this week and start him, Vinny. I thought that's what
I did. I did. That's
okay.
I don't know if you missed I don't know if I would have gotten him based on where we were. Oh, I would have. Because I had one 100%. More loss. So that was me. Apparently, if you try to put in. Apparently, if you try to put in a waiver claim at midnight Pacific time, waivers have already ran. Just throwing that out there. For anybody
I think our league goes through like at 11 o'clock our time, 11:15, somewhere around there.
Yeah. So, Mitch, I mean, honestly, I wanted Eckler this week. Yeah. And if I would have started Marvin Harrison, like that's 25 points that I may regret not having in my lineup. But no, so Mitch has some pretty big buys coming up. Let's look at Cameron, who's also in the wild card hunt and is on kind of a hot streak. Joe Burrow and Breece Hall both on Week 12 buys. Joe Mixon, Zay Flowers, Mark Andrews on Week 14 buys.
He's got his whole team
Um,
then. I didn't realize that.
so those are two really big weeks for him. Miles doesn't get really hit by the bye bug. He has Jaden Daniels Week 14, McLaurin Week 14, but is able to start Kyler in that place. And then it looks like he has Jordan Addison on the bench as well. Trey McBride this week on bye needs to find. Oh, so he's got Pat Fryermuth. Not really hit by the bye bug. But what I wanted to talk about, Adam Sparks, strongest team in the league. Weird saying that. Week 14, Adam and I play each other. He has Lamar Jackson, Jonathan Taylor, Cortland Sutton, Nico Collins, all on bye Week 14.
Which I hate. I hate the new NFL schedules because used to buys ended at week 12, which still sucks because there's one division game with buys, but now buys go through the division games, which just blows. Like, and again, I realize the NFL schedule isn't around our fantasy football schedules, but it still just kind of blows that's a thing now. I don't like that. I really enjoyed back when like you're going to be at full strength in your division matchups because in a league like ours, division matches matter. Like a lot of other leagues, division matches don't matter because it's just points based, right? Which is fine, and I get that. That might be the better way to play from a purely who did the best team standpoint. But this is so much more fun, where it's not just points that matter; it's a division that matters. Like I think it's really cool that we have these really tight division races because, like, if not for the really tight division races, some other people would kind of just no longer be incentivized to play. But because of these tight division races, even though they might be eliminated, like Chris still has something to play for because he can play spoiler. Austin's team is looking better and better, and he has a chance to shape his division with Dad and Mitch. Like that could go either way. Like all these teams are still live to do something, even though they're not mathematically live to make the playoffs.
Right. Yeah, it's and I think, teams, I hate to say this for Nolan and Mitchell, but Austin and Chris's team are both finally healthy, right? So, you get Tyreek with Tua, anything can happen. Stroud getting Nico Collins back.
So you're saying the guy with
Chris,
the most points against in the league has to play Adam, Nolan, and a rising Chris and Austin? That's fun. That's fun times, guys.
yeah. I mean, it is kind of interesting to think about. Like, I think, I am not a draft by buy type of person. I don't care if I stack buys. I would almost rather stack buys and just take an L and have a healthy scene, like a startable roster the rest of the time. Like when you're like mixing buys on studs, it's kind of really sucks. But I mean, I'm looking at Adam missing Lamar, Jonathan Taylor, Sutton, Nico Collins. I mean, he's going to be able to fill those, but those are three studs. With Nico Collins coming back, especially having to replace Lamar, who's been a 30 point per week quarterback, at the wrong time, you would, just, it is an interesting kind of thought.
I'm in playoff mode. I got Adam, Nolan, and then I got the real playoffs. I got to win every week, basically. So, well, it'll be fun. It'll be fun. I don't know. I wouldn't want it any other way. When you lose so much early in the season, it's what the situation calls for at the end. Someone's going to have to win 3 or 4 games at the end of this year to win our Super Bowl, right? Because you got to win 2 games in the playoffs. And then with how tight everything is, you're going to have to win 2 of your last 3 games, most likely. So it's going to be someone's going to win for the next 5 weeks and win the Super Bowl. It has to happen.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, going back to the other thing real quick. Vinny, I know you and I talked about it. We're going back to Jalen Hurts and the Saquon Barkley pre-draft analysis. Because Chris and Austin were physically at my place when we drafted, and we talked about this in length. The reason why Austin went Tyreek Hill and Chris went McCaffrey, who both had picks ahead of me over Barkley, is because everyone's like, oh, Hurts doesn't pass to the running back, like rarely ever, and the tush push, right? I was like, there's no way. There's no way. Jalen, you call the offensive personnel, it's called. They didn't have the personnel to call for Barkley. You're going to run it. Well, I was dead wrong. They're higher than the pace. 29 TDs Jalen Hurts has in the last 2 years, 15 touchdowns and 14. He has 9 already. And get this, Ertz is where I wrote down, the 4th highest average QB per week, and Barkley is the 3rd highest behind Henry and Mixon. So Barkley, so like even though I was wrong about the regression to the TDs, and still right about like how well they were going to be because I had Hurts as the number one fantasy QB. I know you know that, Vinny, for as a fact, and I had Barkley the number three running back behind McCaffrey and Jonathan Taylor. So it's right where we actually call it. Jalen's pretty much up there, and Barkley is still correct. And on top of all that, it's even more touchdowns than the average. 15 and 14, 29 TDs rushing for a QB is so many TDs in 2 years, and he's going to get more than that this year. So, yes, I was dead wrong about the tush push, but somehow it did not affect Saquon Barkley's fantasy value. Somehow.
I mean, I don't think it didn't affect his value. It's just that like you have a good player who could be great. Like, because yeah, you said he's what he's like the fourth. You said he was on average third.
He's behind Mixon and Henry, but Mixon hadn't played most of the year, so he's second technically. If you click the average, he's second, but Mixon's ahead of him.
Yeah, but
there you go.
But it's more so that like he could be up here in Derrick Henry role, right? If he didn't get all this TD snaked.
Sure, but then I might have a little bit more points for it, but I don't know if it really affects my record, is what I'm trying to say. I just need a top 5 running back drafted in that round. I know, and if Derrick Henry comes down to earth, it'd be even more telling that Barkley's fantasy value didn't get hurt. I don't need Barkley, to be the number 1 fantasy running back by head and shoulders because he's number 2 already. So I don't need him to be head and shoulders. I just needed to draft a running back who's actually in the top 5. Because if you look at these running backs, here I have them up right here, preseason draft rankings: 1 McCaffrey, 2 Hall, 3 Bijan, 4 Taylor, 5 Barkley, 6 Henry, 7 Gibbs, 8 Kyron Williams, 9 ETN, 10 Pacheco. Of the top 10, 3 are in that category. So it's like I just needed to hit there so I can be competitive. I'm not saying his value didn't get hurt, Alex, because obviously it has been. But I thought if Ertz was getting this many rushing touchdowns, that Barkley would be somewhere in the 12 to 24 range, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and it's interesting. We talked about draft strategies, and it's funny. You talked about no matter what you wanted to go running back, but as you just said, of the top 10, preseason ranking running backs, only 3 are actually in the top 10. Whereas me, I went wide receiver, which is something I never do, but I was like, you know what? I'm sold on CeeDee Lamb. The CeeDee Dak combo, I wanted it. I went for it. And CeeDee has been good, but like he has not been a world beater wide receiver 1. There have been way better ones, and his value is only going to tank more. Like, if you look where he is now, it seems a lot worse than it was. Like, had he had Dak this week, I think he'd be up here like 3rd or 4th. But like the fact that he's behind
but look at his
Terry McLaurin,
switch.
You know what I mean?
Switch it to average. He's actually higher if you look at the average. I think he was like wide receiver 4.
Okay, yeah, I was gonna say, yeah. So anyway, but the point I was trying to make, like, I think he would have been above Amon-Ra, but it's like, he wouldn't have been above Brown, Godwin, and Nico if they kept playing. But like, yeah, he would have been fine, but his value is going to tank now. So I went the wide receiver route. You went the running back route. You happened to hit on yours, and I didn't. I'm not going to say I missed on mine, but when I took him as wide receiver 1, it is a miss. When you look at Jamar Chase, like there's just no excuse, right? Like,
like look at that page though. Leave it on that page. Now I'm going to read you the top 10 wide receiver preseason rankings.
Sure.
CeeDee Lamb 1, sure. Hill 2. So Hill's not up there, but Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, St. Brown, A.J. Brown, Garrett Wilson, Puka Nacua, Deebo Samuel, Mike Evans. And I think CBS had Nico at 10, and the one I'm looking at has Mike at 10. So you could put Nico and Mike tied or whatever. But that's like 7 guys, is it not, out of the top 10? Like, or top 12, right? We named like 7.
Yeah, a lot more hit than missed. But that's
right.
But I'm saying like that's kind of anti what your point was. Now, I understand why you did it because like there's a lot more. There's a lot more to it. In hindsight, I wish I'd gone. Look, in hindsight, I wish I'd gone running back because you and I talked about this. If CeeDee Lamb wasn't there, I was going King Henry. That was the guy I was going to take in round 1. So I actually screwed myself in multiple leagues this year. CeeDee Lamb fell to me, which I did not expect. I took him instead of King Henry. My season's way different, and I mean, not that I'm not having a good season, but like I'm sitting very pretty right now. And in another league, I kept Tyreek Hill in a keeper league versus keeping King Henry.
That's rough.
That was a salary. Now, to be fair to me, Tyreek Hill was a smaller salary cap hit than Henry, but it was close, and I could have made either one work. And for context, I had to start Cam Akers this week in that league. prior to Aaron Jones
Yes,
getting hurt, like
I
going
was just gonna
into
say
this
the
week,
opportune cost
I had
of who you're
so
starting.
the
yeah,
cost
exactly.
was pretty massive
Yeah.
because I've ended up picking up Hopkins and Calvin Ridley in that league, so like I don't really need Tyreek Hill, and he hasn't played well at all anyway. But like even if Tyreek Hill was Tyreek Hill, like I would still be okay without him. Whereas like I am doing very poor without Derrick Henry in that league now. So different
Yeah.
strategies.
This
went
this
different
was
ways.
actually kind of like the other talking point I had last week that was just one, how the wide receivers have self-regulated as the season went on, which is not to toot my own horn, but just what I predicted when we did the overreactions like week 2 or 3, that we were going to see all the typical names rise to the top. But it is interesting because after you get to like say wide receiver 10 here on this list, the names you just wouldn't expect. Like these are late round guys. Like you get Terry McLaurin, Jaden Reed, Drake
You're nice.
London,
Yeah.
Even T Higgins, right? Like going into this year,
Neighbors,
like
Mooney.
there was a pretty big question mark around T Higgins going into this year too.
Right.
Like we weren't sure if
Yeah.
he was going to sign. We weren't sure how Burrow was going to look. But yeah, Alan Lazard, obviously, Malik Neighbors. We all thought he would be good, but we thought because of where
Mooney.
he played, he wasn't going to be good.
Mooney is a joke.
Darnell Mooney's insane. And again, this is sorted by
Yeah.
average. If you sort by fantasy points, because like fantasy points
Mooney's top
takes into
12.
account injuries, Mooney hasn't been injured, so Mooney's played every game, and he's a top 7 fantasy wide receiver.
How about look at this, the Kirk Thuggins effect, boys.
Yeah,
2 of the top 8 wide receivers, Falcons wide receivers.
Drake London,
Okay,
Darnell Mooney.
This is going to lead into my question that I want, and it might take up too much time, so I didn't want to go first. But we can cut this off and go to other questions, and we can continue this next week. But this was also stolen from the Dan Patrick Show, so I'll give him a shout out to Dan Patrick. Okay, how long? And we can name any quarterback, any current quarterback. How long? And do we personally ourselves? Does it take a rookie QB to determine if he is good or bad? Like when does a verdict come out on a rookie QB? So how long do they get? So obviously he's not a rookie after year 1, but if you go all throughout the first one, Baker, I thought Baker was terrible for about 4 or 5. So the answer to Baker is about 4 or 5 years and a team change. What Darnold? About 3 years, 2 years, and a team change. Like how long until we can determine? You go all the way down the line. Russell Wilson was supposed to be a 3rd-round draft pick rookie, and he was so much clearly better than Matt Flynn, who was brought in on a big contract that Pete Carroll was like, I got to start Russ because he clearly looks better, and Russ was way better than Matt Flynn. So like how long? Daniel Jones, the answer to him, 5 years apparently, and then we have a verdict on him. Like what's
Terrible.
That's what I'm saying is where up and down, like Cousins, like even when RG3 got hurt, Cousins came in and performed well. And that's what drove up his whole, brand or whatever you want to call it. So like, is it the answer I'm trying to get to on a conclusion is like, I think we're just picking and choosing. Like, how long do we determine CJ Stroud was good and Bryce Young was bad? How long do we determine Caleb Williams is good or bad? How long do we determine that Jaden Daniels is actually good or bad? Lamar Jackson had an amazing rookie year, then disappeared off the face of the earth for 2.5 years, and then became back-to-back league MVPs. I'm assuming he's going to win it this year. So, like, where do we get to pick and choose? And who and when? And yes, this comes from my biasness of Cousins and Baker, because Cousins was a pedestrian quarterback for most of his career to like the last 2 or 3 years. Like, how come he gets a 15-year career? And then Baker has an abysmal first 4 years, and then now he's a world beater. Like, no even joke.
on.
Like, you take away Godwin and Evans. Yeah.
You keep look, okay, before I say this, I fully admit I'm a Kirk Cousins homer. All right? I know that I am biased. However, I also think that you are very biased against him. And you and I have had this conversation off the podcast with the whole pie bet situation. I don't think you realized how good he was in Minnesota because you were focused on a couple of bad years. Because, yes, he wasn't good in Washington. But once he got to Minnesota, first year in Minnesota, 4,300 yards, 30 TDs. Then he had a bad year. Year 2 was bad. But ever since that second year,
Okay, I agree.
4,200 yards,
I agree with you,
35
Alex.
TDs. 4,200 yards,
Then let me take
33
Cousins
TDs.
off this list. I'm biased towards
2019.
Cousins. So let me take Cousins off this
Okay, so the point that I'm making is Cousins has been good every year he's played, with the exception of his second year in Minnesota and his time in Washington. But again, his time in Washington, he was only a starter for a couple of years there, and one of those years he threw for almost 5,000 yards. So like, I wouldn't even say he was bad in Washington. I just think that Kirk Cousins, you're biased against him, and maybe
Okay, so we'll take out Cousins for the argument. Then he was good earlier on, and I didn't realize it. But everyone else, you can go to any quarterback in the league, even Kyler Murray. Is he good or bad? Like Brock Purdy, how long do we like? Okay, he's good, right? We've determined after a year he's good, but other quarterbacks are getting 4 or 5 years. Do you get what I'm saying? It's like, where are we picking and choosing these guys? It's like if they put something on tape, then we just automatically assume they have a chance in the NFL because they've done it one time. Then RG3 would still be a quarterback. Like I'm just confused
Yeah.
on. Yeah, that's what I'm saying is where are we picking and what is like just give me a definition for the future of whether I can make a decision or not if a QB is good or not. So I don't have to get pied in the face anymore over Baker Mayfield or Kirk Cousins. I know I'm biased towards Cousins, sorry, but you know what I'm saying? It's like help me out here. What makes a good
No,
QB and how long?
I think that's a fantastic take actually. Like Baker has been revitalized these last 2 years after literally being kicked to the curb. And then, like you said, then Darnold kicked to the curb, Geno Smith kicked to the curb, like both on winning teams, winning games for their team. Like they're not just like a management guy. Jared Goff has taken the Lions of the
There's
promised
another
land
one.
and he was written off. So I wonder, like, is that why it's like, okay, hey, let's extend Daniel Jones and see what happens? Or maybe like that's good news for Trevor Lawrence. Like, hey,
Yep.
once you get an offensive
Herbert.
line, you're gonna be pretty good. I actually think CJ Stroud is interesting because he has not been good this year. He's actually had some very abysmal games.
And he was
And
the
then you
greatest
get
quarterback coming last year, right? Everyone's like, oh, Stroud, Stroud, Stroud. And now it's like, what? Maybe Stroud's bad? Like, I don't get it.
yeah. And like they've and then you look at the other guys from that class, like Bryce Young already benched, Anthony Richardson already benched.
What
But
about
yeah,
Richardson?
I'm not saying Stroud deserves to be benched, but it's like, man, these guys deserve maybe a longer leash. Derek Carr is started every year of his career. Like, how has that happened?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, I get this is actually a fantastic point. Like, I never actually really thought about it, but like, what dictates? Like, why is Derek Carr started every single year, every single game on his team, and Baker has been like this drifter,
It's
or
such a
Sam
simple
Darnold, or
question, but
Geno
it takes
Smith?
you, yeah, it takes you down such a dark rabbit hole. Like Bo Nix now, Anthony Richardson. When are they gonna get there? Like, do we have to wait 5 years to figure out Bo Nix is good or not? Like, I'm like, what? I've never been so lost.
I mean, I don't. I mean, so yes, I do think. I think it's been an argument recently in the league that just quarterbacks are not developed as well as they used to be. I think it's much more of a sink or swim league than it used to be. Used to, people would come in, they'd sit for a couple years, and they'd take over. Cousins is a great example of that. Cousins is from that era. Cousins was not a starter, as I showed you. He didn't take over the starting job in Washington until about 4 years into his career, right? A lot of these guys, they ride the bench for a while, but then when teams hit the jackpot with guys like Patrick Mahomes who come in, their second year in the league, and all of a sudden they're a world beater, all these teams are trying to rush people now, and I think that's why we're getting less developed people. It's a lot more sink or swim. I think there are some guys who were thrown into the fire early that had they been given time to develop would have been good, and there's other guys that don't need that development time, and teams are looking to win now. So that's why they're like, you know what, we're just gonna go ahead and
So
give and
that's
rip
a
the
great
Band-Aid
point,
off
Alex.
and
So,
see what happens. Bo Nix,
so
perfect
CJ
example.
Love.
The Broncos have never started, a starter like that, right off the jump, other than Elway to have any success, and he's been pretty successful. Bo Nix has, but also it's worth noting, Bo Nix is 24. A lot of guys come out of college at 21, right? So Bo Nix is an older
Right.
player compared to some of these other guys who's had more development time.
You know what
To your
this
point, Alex,
tells me,
those are,
Alex?
sorry, Vinny, before I forget, those are great points, Alex. Like Mahomes sat, Rodgers sat, so that brings us to Love. So we get to decide right now this year if Love is good or bad because he's had the opportunity to sit that other quarterbacks have not gotten. So he should not be struggling, right? But he is, but we think he's good. So like it's just great. Those are yeah, it's so much to think about.
No, I was actually going to say, like, is this all just a Michael Penix Jr. conversation?
No, I messed up on my double down. I think week 2, Alex asked us on double downs, and I said Cousins will be gone by week 9 to Penix, and I am so very off on that one. Cousins is having, let's just make it clear, I am wrong. Cousins is having a great year. He's making all of his wide receivers fantasy relevant, and even Pitts. Like I'll never draft Pitts without Cousins in the future because this is going to be Pitts' best 2 years or whatever. No, I'm wrong about Cousins is great. Cousins is doing great, and it's actually
Somebody
good to
clip
see
that.
him.
Somebody clip that. I'm making that a gif or a meme or something like Cousins is
You
great.
can
Came
clip
out of
it now.
Mitchell Black's mouth.
Cousins is
Mark
great
the
because
timestamp, 7:07 p.m.
and-
Central Time on November 12th, the year of our Lord 2024.
He's made a
You're
believer out of
wrong.
me. He has made a believer. And the other thing that's kind of helped him make a believer out of me is my favorite player and the guy I idolize who had the same injury as him and looks like a shade of himself, which is Aaron Rodgers. He does not look like the Rodgers I've known ever. He cannot move. There was a play this week and I watched him where he got tackled from behind and it's like he didn't even expect it from it. And it was just like he got up, it wasn't hurt or anything. And he's just like, I know my Rodgers. And he's getting up in that sequence and he's like, what am I doing here? Like, why am I still playing football? Whereas opposed to I watch Cousins play and it's just completely different body language and they had the same injury. So no, Cousins made me a believer this year, with the same injuries as Rodgers helped a lot. But like, I just, back to like what was it? Oh, I forgot what I was gonna say now. But the guys like Josh Rosen or just guys who have been written off like that. Like they got 1 year in Arizona and then they drafted Murray. Like other guys are getting many, many years. It's just very confusing to me. Like, so how does Love have a much shorter leash because he sat Burns? Like, what are the criterias for the GMs and everything? And it's every time I think about any different QB, it's like a different set of criteria for that QB.
Yeah.
But yes,
Okay,
Cousins good.
here's a fun one then.
Well, hold on.
Taking that bait. Oh, go ahead,
I'm
Alex.
still on QBs. Are you changing the topic or are you talking about
No,
QBs?
no, yes, no. I'm still QBs.
Okay, because I was going to comment on Rodgers.
Still on
Go
the
ahead.
same topic.
Okay.
No, you can go ahead and comment on Rodgers.
Yeah, so right now Rodgers is 10th in passing yards, and it's worth noting that he has not had his bye yet. So not only is he 10th in passing yards, he's trailing multiple players who have already had a bye week. 3 players ahead of him in passing yards have already had a bye. So he's going to fall even further, and obviously there's a lot of players behind him. So he's not even going to be a top 12 player in passing yards this year. They talked about, there was an interview after his game, and normally, he runs his mouth and talks about all this stuff. He didn't have anything to say in the post-game interview, and they were kind of
That's
saying
not my
like,
Rodgers.
and that's not like Rodgers at all. And they were saying it kind of just looked like it looked like he finally had the self-realization that he's the problem and that he doesn't have it anymore. Like it's not there and it's not coming back. Now I don't know how true
His
that
body
is.
language
Obviously
says that, Alex. Yeah.
But yeah, because
Not
normally
agreeing,
he
it's
always
great.
has something to say. Normally he has something to say, usually to blame other people. To be honest with you, like blaming other factors. But there was a play that they showed on the highlights where he throws the ball 4 yards behind a receiver, and then gets mad at the receiver for not stopping for the pass. But it's like, even if he had stopped, he would have just stood there for 3 seconds and let a linebacker stand next to him. Like talking about a 4 yard run, you know what I mean? Maybe not 3 seconds, but like you know what I'm saying? Like you can't just stop in the middle of your route. Like Rodgers just doesn't have it anymore, which I kind of said there's a reason that the Packers moved on from him, right? I'm a huge Brett Favre homer, just like I am with Cousins. I was a big Favre fan. But look, there's a reason the Packers let Favre go and went with Rodgers, right? Even though Rodgers hadn't proven himself in games yet, they thought they had something in him. They let Favre go. There's a reason Packers let Aaron Rodgers go, period. You don't let legitimate franchise QBs go, right? There's a reason the Raiders let Derek Carr go. I don't agree with it because we had no follow-up plan, but when you look at what Derek Carr is doing in New Orleans, all right, I can see why they didn't think they needed to keep him around for that contract. So, like, there's a reason quarterbacks get let go. Good quarterbacks don't get let go. Peyton Manning, when he got let go, everyone thought it was crazy. Well, look how good Luck was for the brief period of time he was in the league. But more importantly, look how bad Peyton was. Wait, Alex, Peyton won a Super Bowl. Yeah, he did, but look at his stats. He was not very good. They had amazing defense. They had some great players around him. Peyton and his decision-making, and as a, I'm not going to say game manager because he's more the game manager, but he wasn't Peyton Manning anymore is the point that I'm making. When a team lets a franchise quarterback go, there's a reason for it. They let him go, and the Jets fell into the same trap they always do, signing guys who are past their prime.
I agree like 80% with your Peyton Manning take because he did set the single season touchdown record his first year on the Broncos. I'm pretty sure it wasn't like 50 touchdowns or something like that.
Yeah.
Right, because he makes smart play.
But I get what you're saying.
But like his completion percentage was down, his yardage was down, like things like that.
Yeah. No, yeah, I completely agree. I mean, Rodgers isn't the same. That's a great point. Like, you just don't let these people go. I mean, you can even say Kirk Cousins is not doing what he did last year, right? Or what he did in Minnesota. So, same kind of thing. But, I was thinking about Mitchell's point, and I'm kind of looking here at backup quarterbacks. Who is the next Geno Smith, Sam Darnold, Baker Mayfield prototype out of this list? I feel kind of like it's kind of cheating adding Justin Fields in there, but we can
I think of
technically
all of them,
include
Geno
Justin
Smith is the
Fields.
biggest surprise to me, by the way, like that he's on the list. Because
Oh,
again,
yeah.
Kirk was with a bad Redskins team. Baker was with a bad Cleveland team, and not just bad teams, but bad owners, right? That was before the Redskins had to sell the team, right? He was with the bad owner. Baker, the Browns ownership's just ridiculous. Geno's the most surprising of them to me. But again, who was Geno with before? The Jets. Before
Well,
he was, so like maybe that's what it is. When you're with a bad team, you don't do well.
and the
With bad
fact that
ownership.
Geno did it like 7 years into his career, 8 years, like
That's,
way
that,
later in
that's
his
why it's
career.
more surprising for me. The Baker and Kirk both did it after 4 seasons with a bad team, whereas 4 or 5, whereas Geno it's 7 with multiple teams. But anyway, sorry, go ahead. I didn't mean to keep interrupting you. Just
So,
I want to comment.
so no, you're good. I'll put Justin Fields in there, even though I feel like it's kind of maybe the low hanging fruit. But I got 4 quarterbacks. Who do you think is the next long term starter? Justin Fields, Jameis Winston, Mac Jones backing up Trevor Lawrence now, Drew Luck backing up Daniel Jones. I feel like those are the 4 situations where you could see one of those people taking over long term at some point.
That's interesting. So I don't think it's going to be in mid-season. I think it's going to be off-season. Someone grabs the QB, the offensive coordinator, the head coach who's calling the plays, finds a QB that he likes or thinks he can work with, and goes and grabs
And,
him in the
and not
off-season.
even this year, Mitch. Not even this
Oh,
year. Who do
gotcha.
you think is the next like Geno, Baker, Darnold story arc? Because Darnold even went to like 2 other teams before he ended up in Minnesota, right? So,
No, for sure.
Well,
Mac
and
Jones, Drew Luck,
Darnold's finally
Justin
coming back down to
Fields,
earth, though.
Jameis
He's had a
Winston.
couple of bad games in a row. To be fair about Darnold, like he's come
Yeah.
down to earth a little bit.
Well, I mean, Josh Rosen's on the Vikings. If anything were to happen to Sam Darnold right now, they have that rookie guy or whatever, but they might start Rosen instead. I'm just saying, like, I don't know. It's a great question. I'd have to go look at all the backups or whatever
Well,
in the league and see.
Well, if we're
But
picking
go on, I'm
between the
sorry.
4 choices he gave us, what were the 4 choices again? It was Fields, Luck,
I
Mac
Fields,
Jones, and
Drew
who?
Lock, Mac Jones, and Jameis Winston.
Winston.
So I, as far as talent goes, it's Winston, right? But he's in the same situation where it's a bad Browns team. Now, if I had to pick someone, I guess I will still say him because even though and when I say bad, I mean bad organization. I don't necessarily mean there's bad players on the Browns. There are plenty of talented players on the Cleveland Browns, but it's a bad organization. I'm going to say him just because it's very clear Deshaun Watson did not work out. Anyone with eyeballs can see that. Whereas when you look at these other situations, I don't think Mac Jones was that good in college. He played on he won because he played for Alabama. Like he played for Saban in Alabama. They had all the players, and look at how many wide receiver ones have come out of that school in the last decade, right? So like when you have the best and running back ones, when you have the best running backs, the best wide receivers, the best offensive line, the best defensive line, you're going to win football games, and so I don't think that's a big deal. There's a reason that Alabama quarterbacks have not translated to the NFL. The only exception to that rule, because I'm not even counting 2, I don't think he's had one good year. The only exception to that rule has been Jalen Hurts, and that's just because they built an offense around him, and even he had a couple of struggle years where he did well. So like, of all those championships that Bama won, they've only put one legitimate quarterback in the NFL, in my opinion, and Jalen Hurts. So I don't think it's Mac Jones. I don't think that that Drew Luck is going to necessarily take anyone's job, but he would be my second pick just because like we haven't seen as much of him. So yeah, I think Winston's kind of the only option. I already forgot who the fourth one was, but they're no chance for them either.
Oh, I got a Vinny. I got a Vinny. I'm not going to go with the 4. I'll go with Winston because Alex broke it down. I'll go with 2 other ones. I think Drake May is interesting and quietly looking really good to me as like a late guy. A lot of people aren't paying attention to the Patriots right now, and he might be a steal next year from week 1 to week 2. But I think more specifically to answer your question as a backup, I think it's got to be the guy in Green Bay, right? He's proven he can come out, play with a good offense, win 2 games. There might be someone next year who is in a QB situation that goes, I think I could take that backup from Green Bay or whatever, bring him here and
That's a
make
good
him a
point
winner.
because that backup in Green Bay, Malik Willis, was
Malik Willis, yeah.
was the
Thank you.
starter in Tennessee, a bad organization, right? So
Yeah.
Yeah.
he was the starter.
No,
in
actually,
Tennessee.
it's really funny you brought that up, Mitch, because I went and looked at Malik Willis's stats but even before asking the question, I was like, surely nobody here is actually going to think Malik Willis is good and has that potential, even though he was successful with Green Bay. And I was like, it would be too hot of a take to add him to the list. but I don't disagree with that. I actually think he has the potential. So it is interesting to see like these backups. I think my answer would be Drew Lock. I think he's got good talent in New York, and they obviously hate Daniel Jones. He went from where did he go? Denver to Seattle, now to New York. So like kind of a similar Baker path, and similar kind of Geno Smith story arc. So I'd just be rooting for Drew Lock just to kind of be that like vagabond backup quarterback that ends up taking over.
I got two others now because this is the first time I've heard this question from you right now, and this is fun for me. I got two more in my head. The backup for the Texans, who was playing well before they drafted Stroud, he looked like he was going to be really good too.
Davis Riley, is that what his name is?
I think Mills or what Davis or something.
Davis
like that.
Mills. Davis Mills.
Thank you. He looked good, then disappeared because Stroud came in and done it. And then there's another one on the Bucks that was what's his name? Baker was competing with Kyle whatever, and he looked good too. I was like, oh, maybe I hated Baker, but he's gonna win that job in Tampa, Kyle Trask or whatever. And I was like, oh, he's gonna win that job, but Baker obviously proved why he deserves it and won it. So I think maybe it's like Kyle Trask who didn't get an actual shot to play, or the guy in Houston who got overshadowed by Stroud all of a sudden. Because Mills was actually playing really well for the Texans when they drafted Stroud. So I don't know. That's a great question. There's like 3 or 4 guys.
Yeah, I actually and I'll go on. I like Mitch's takes better than mine. I just took the most obvious answer, and I think Davis Mills is probably the best pick of all of them that has a chance if he ends up on another roster and gets a starting chance. Because really, this question comes down to who's going to get the opportunity, right? Because I am sure there are some people. Look. There's some career backups like Jim Sorgi who got to bring his lawn chair to the game, set it up on the sidelines. For those who don't know, we've made this joke for a while. He was the backup to Peyton Manning. Peyton Manning played every single game. Peyton Manning played every single game of his career until like year 17. So Jim Sorgi got to strut out, pull out a margarita, kick up his legs, and just watch the game from the sideline. They were in a dome, so you didn't have to worry about the weather. So there's some people that's who they are, but there's other guys that like you don't know. They might be a ball. There's other guys that might be like Ryan Fitzmagic, right? That just for some reason they ball when they finally get the opportunity, So who knows? Who knows who it's going to be? But yeah, there's probably somebody out there who was underdeveloped, but then got to stick around long enough that when they get a chance and they've developed a bit, they can do something. So
that's exactly what it comes down to, Alex. That's well said. It's the opportunity with the underdevelopment who have developed, and now they get the opportunity again.
All right. Well, that debate took a while. We're over normal time. Anyone have any final like really short thing, or we can wrap here if anyone has any like final takeaways or final thoughts for this week?
No, I'm good with wrapping. I really enjoyed that kind of last little back and forth. I love the hypotheticals, right? Like Mitch even said, it's really hard for someone to draft somebody and get off the blinders that they have on someone's roster. So it's kind of fun to do the hypotheticals about what could be in the future.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, thanks for tuning in. Hope everyone enjoyed the episode, and let us know in the comments or text or whatever. What do you guys want to be called? The listeners of the show. What should we call the denizens of the dungeon? Is it the word denizens? Like what is it you guys want to be called as listeners of the show? Thank you so much. Have a wonderful weekend, unless you're playing me, in which case I hope all your players decide to sit out for contract reasons. Peace out, everybody.
Adam, I appreciate you building my computer so much. I'm willing to sit my team this year for you to get the W. Let me know.
All right, I got that on record because I hadn't stopped the recording yet, so later.